Hello, and welcome to Food and Hormones. This is a masterclass where you're going to learn which foods help your hormones and which ones wreak havoc with your hormones. So sit back, enjoy the class, and if you can, shut off your cell phone or at least mute it so that you can have a little time for yourself, because you know what? You deserve it. And if there's any background noise, if you wouldn't mind just muting, that would be really great. So let's get started. My name's Kat Ogar. I am a naturopathic practitioner. I'm trained in the areas of homeopathy, acupressure, and nutrition with a holistic view on how we eat, one size does not fit all approach, as well as lifestyle management. And I'm currently enrolled at the Trinity School of Natural Health to become a naturopathic doctor, which I'm super excited about. So if you've followed me in the past, and you probably know this already, but my health issues in the past have been adrenal fatigue, gut health issues. I've had anxiety and panic disorder on and off throughout the years for about almost 40 years now. And I was diagnosed at one point with thyroid dysfunction, but through changing my diet and some of my lifestyle habits, I was able to eliminate that, which probably caught it right on time, and we're fortunate enough to just be able to reverse it. So these days, I'm taking good care of myself. I've been working on all the things that I have come across through other wellness professionals, as well as my own research on how best to take care of me. And one of the things that I like to do when I'm teaching people or working with them is to teach you how to take care of you. So that's partly what today's class is all about, to give you some tools so that you can start out on your own or start where you're at and start to make some changes so that you can have a better lifestyle, which is what we all want. So we're talking about 3 of our major hormones. Of course, there's way more than that, but we're just talking about 3 in this particular class, and what they do and what happens when they're balanced and what happens when they're out of balance. So balanced hormones improve overall health and well-being. I think we probably all know that. They help us feel happy and feel normal. And that's one of the things that when people come into my practice and I ask them what their health goal is, I often hear, I just want to feel normal. And I don't really think that's too much to ask, do you? It's just a normal lifestyle. We just want to be able to pursue things that make us happy, and we don't want to be dealing with an overabundance of stress and overwhelm. And because what ends up happening is the hormones get out of balance. And when they're unbalanced, they can lead to symptoms like weight gain, especially around the middle, mood swings. I think we've all experienced that a time or two. Insomnia, that was my big Achilles heel in 2017. And sleep is critical for health. Forgetfulness, brain fog, anxiety and depression, and hot flashes. So these are all some of the things that happen, and there's more, when we're not feeling right, when our hormones are out of balance. So let's get started and dive into how do we change, how do we make changes for the best and what's best for us, for our particular lifestyle. And so some of these things that we're going to learn will resonate with you, and if that's true, then please incorporate them. If they don't, maybe you've tried something before and it didn't work, or it wasn't the right thing for you, maybe a particular food wasn't right for you. I want you to pay attention to that too, because guess what? You're the expert in you. And no matter what I or any other wellness professional says, the long and the short of it is you're your best advocate for your own health, and you're the one who knows best what works for you. So hormones, what do they do? So they are chemical messengers. They're basically running around telling parts of the body what to do. And when they're working right, then everything's, fine. We're not paying too much attention to anything like that. But the minute you get a hot flash, we're all paying attention, right? So we're going to start first with cortisol. And I talk a lot about cortisol in my practice and in any of the medias that I use to get the message out about stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. Cortisol is a big one. It is a stress hormone, and that can be a good thing, and it can be not such a good thing. It's a cortisol is based, when it's working well, on circadian rhythms. And basically that means that when we get up in the morning, we're going to get a little push of cortisol that's been excreted from the adrenal glands, which are tiny little glands that sit on top of our kidneys. And that's going to give us the energy to get up, get out of bed, get moving, get everybody out of the house, get to your first place, wherever that is, whether it's an appointment at work. And so that's what happens when cortisol is operating optimally. And then we'll get little releases of it throughout the day. And as the sun starts to go down, so it does work with the natural rhythm of things, it starts to dissipate. And we end up, having less cortisol in the system because we want to get tired. We want to be tired for bed and get ready and kind of just slow things down and clear the mental chatter from our mind and allow ourselves the proper time to rest. So what happens is, if we don't follow that rhythm, if in fact we're tired throughout the day, and we're going to get a little bit more into this with the food, we may try to do things to give ourselves more energy. And I want you to start paying attention to that. What are you doing to improve your energy? Is it something that fortifies you, or is it something that's really going to take you down sooner or later? So the thing with cortisol is we can have high cortisol, which means we've got too much cortisol in the system. And because it is a stress hormone, that means that we're going to feel stressed. We're going to get ourselves in that fight or flight situation. And doing that periodically isn't a bad thing, but it's when we do it over and over again. If you think about the idea of maybe around between 7 and 8:30 p.m., you start to get tired, but most people still have quite a few things to get done before they can even consider going to bed. So we tend to push through that tiredness. And a lot of us will call that a second wind. Essentially, what you've done is you've kind of get the on-demand part of your body, like TV. You can demand from your body more energy. So you can either use food for that, caffeine, or more likely, you're probably just going to do what we all have done multiple times throughout our lives, which is push through it. And that's the second wind. And basically that's cortisol, which is usually why when you do that, you're good to go for another 2 to 4 or 6 hours. So not really the best thing to do at that time of night, especially if you're going to do it over and over again. It's one thing if it's a one-off, you've got to get a deadline done. But if you're doing this on a continual basis, you can expect that particular hormone is going to get really out of whack. So you could end up having high cortisol, like I mentioned, and be super stressed, feel kind of anxious and on edge. You can have low cortisol, which means you've used so much of your reserves of cortisol that now you're actually exhausted, your adrenals are exhausted. Or you can have high and low cortisol, which means that you're exhausted, but you're tired but wired. So your body just can't rest. And that's a recipe for disaster, I can tell you right now. So let's try and keep that from happening. And then secondly is testosterone. And while it is a male hormone, most people consider it think of it as a male hormone. Women need it too. We need it for so many reasons. One of them being intimacy, because, if you're in a relationship with someone, intimacy is usually a pretty big piece of keeping that relationship on solid ground. There's a lot of things, but that's one of them. And when you don't have the energy for that, your testosterone's low, then the wheels are going to start to fall off the cart in that area too. It's also good for muscle strength and tone, and especially as we age, we definitely want to keep that up. And then lastly is melatonin. So melatonin takes over where cortisol leaves off. So when things are working the way that they should, cortisol is going to decrease around dusk, when starting to get dark out, and then melatonin is secreted by the pineal gland, which is located, it's often referenced to as the third eye area. And if you're not familiar with that, it's essentially in the middle of your forehead, just above your eyebrows. And the pineal gland's really tiny. It's about the size of a grain of rice. So that hormone, that gland is secreting, when the sun goes down, melatonin, so that we can start preparing ourselves for rest. And sleep is critical when it comes to hormonal health, when it comes to any kind of health, because that's when our body heals. And that's when we're able to restore ourselves. And sorry about that, barking dog. So you can see there's a bit of a rhythm going here between cortisol and melatonin. One kicks off and then kind of, does its job, and then the night shift comes on, and that's melatonin. Okay, so we're here for foods that help balance hormones naturally. Now, there's probably a lot more than what we have here, but I'm just going to focus on a few because I really think that change comes when you pick one or two things to implement in your life and you make it a new habit so that it becomes part of your normal landscape. It's not really helpful to throw a lot of things at yourself at any one time because that just adds to overwhelm. And guess what? It gets the hormones kind of freaked out again. And we don't want that. So we're going to start with healthy fats. You're probably familiar with these: coconut oil, avocado, also avocado oil. And one of the things I love about avocado oil is it's really good for cooking it at medium and higher heats. Whereas, extra virgin olive oil, while such a wonderful oil to incorporate into your lifestyle, you really don't want to do a whole lot of cooking with that, or high heat cooking, because it tends to, devalue the nutrients that are in it. So grab yourself a bottle of avocado oil. You're not going to even really notice the difference that much. It's very similar in consistency. The flavor is a bit different, but when you're cooking, usually the food takes on the flavor of, the oil takes on the flavor of the food. So then we also have eggs, and please eat the whole egg. Eggs are a superfood. Every little piece of that egg has beautiful nutrients in it. So unless you're eating a ton of eggs, which most people don't, most people stick to between 1 and 3 eggs, don't worry so much about the cholesterol. There's a lot of myths that are being debunked around eggs causing high cholesterol. You'd have to eat a ton of them. And again, maybe check in with your doctor on that, because if you've gotten medical advice that says otherwise, then please pay attention to that. But for the most part, they're a pretty safe bet. And then we have fatty fish like salmon, tuna, sardines, mackerel, herring. And one of the most important things I want you to think of when it comes to healthy fats is, number one, they're not going to put weight on you. They're actually going to help you lose weight, which is something that a lot of people are interested in. And the thing with these healthy fats is they keep us satiated. And that means that our body isn't going to be looking for junk food or scrounging around, likely to binge on things that are going to give us quick energy, because the healthy fats provide sustainable energy. So another good reason. And you can do a lot of things with this. You can cook with the coconut oil. You can put avocados in your smoothies. You can make pudding out of them. Of course, eggs are pretty versatile, and fish. So however you want to get your healthy fats in, just make sure you're getting a sufficient amount for you and your body type throughout the week. And then we're going to go on to nuts. So these are great for snacks, for breakfast. And the one thing that's really great about walnuts, aside from the fact that they're high in omega-3, is that and nuts in general, nuts and seeds in general that are high in the omega-3s, is that they reduce inflammation in the body. And if you haven't heard this yet, you probably will sooner or later. Inflammation is the leading cause of all illness and disease. So the long and the short of it is we want to keep the inflammation down. We only want our body to have an inflammatory response when it's warranted. Like perhaps you got a cut and of course we want it to heal, or you're having a surgery. We want the inflammation to fight off infection and to help the body heal. What we don't want is inflammation, wreaking havoc in our body to the point where, it's starting to deplete us. And cortisol, that little pesky bugger that I mentioned a couple slides back, when you have elevated cortisol for long periods of time, it causes a great amount of inflammation in the body. And I speak of this with firsthand with experience. It took a lot for me to get the inflammation down in my body. I had to have the omega-3s and some of the other foods that we're going to be talking about, between fish oils and foods. So please don't let yourself get to that state, because you're not going to feel that great. We want to keep on top of this. So this is one of those things that you can add in. A simple recipe for this might be, you know, either cold or warmed. I tend to like it warmed. I put a stock pot on the stove, a little one, a small saucepan, add a little bit of water to the bottom, just enough to, you know, coat the bottom. I cut up an apple, also really good for digestion. And then I sprinkle it with cinnamon, anti-inflammatory. I add about a 1/4 cup to a 1/3 cup of walnuts. And then I turn the heat on to heat it up. I don't necessarily cook it all the way. If you like your apples more soft with the applesauce quality, then you'd cook it longer. But I'm talking maybe on like medium-low heat, about 2 or 3 minutes. And then once I get it, the apples to the desired consistency, I put it in a bowl and I add 2 tablespoons of chia seeds. Mix it all up and then have that. It's a really great healthy breakfast. It tastes delicious and it's so filling. You'll love it. Okay, probiotics. So you've probably heard a lot about probiotics by now. Their commercials on TV are running rampant, and that's a good thing. We want people to become more aware of probiotics and what they do and the benefits to us. So from a food perspective, there's a lot of different foods that you can eat. Sauerkraut, if you like that. Kimchi, which if you haven't heard of that, it's made from salted fermented vegetables, and it's often made up of like Napa cabbage, Korean radishes, scallions, garlic, and ginger, and usually some spices too, like a cayenne type spice. And it's fermented. And so these things are actually really good for your stomach because they're going to fortify the good bacteria. And that's what we want. We want our stomach to be working at optimal levels because it really is the epicenter for our immunity. So the healthier your gut is, the healthier you're going to feel. It's one of the reasons why if you eat, you know, a weekend binge of junk food and you just feel absolutely, utterly horrible, you know, when the weekend's over, that's one of the reasons. You know, you're not getting good food. So probiotics are good for a number of reasons. Number one, they improve immunity. They increase the good bacterial flora in our gut, and it helps to process food better for optimal nutrients. So make sure that we're absorbing those nutrients, and it also reduces hunger. The more your body is able to absorb the nutrients that it needs in order to do the day-to-days that we have on our plates, then the less food you're going to eat. Because when the body's not getting nutrients, so again, back to the junk food, you could be eating and the next thing you know, you're hungry again. It's because your body recognizes like, yes, you fed me. Yes, you filled my stomach. However, there was nothing in there that I could really use for fuel. So what else you got? You know, so keep that in mind when you're eating. Another great source of probiotics is bone broth. And I love this picture because this is exactly what I do when I make up a batch of bone broth. And it's so simple. Basically, you take a big stock pot, you put in preferably raw chicken, either a whole chicken or chicken parts that are still on the bone. And that's the critical component. We want the bones in there. So you put the chicken in the pot, put the water up as high as you can, and then maybe leave an inch or two at the top to make sure it doesn't boil over. And the next part is really the most critical piece. You want to add 2 tablespoons of raw apple cider vinegar. And what that's going to do is it's going to extract all the minerals and nutrients from the bone and put it into the broth. So that's what's going to be really what's healing of the gut. And then from there, you can add whatever you want. You could add some salt and pepper, carrots, celery, onions, whatever you want to flavor your broth. When it's done, and you want to cook this no less than 4 hours, and preferably like 8 hours, or even on low overnight. So once you get everything in the pan, you bring it to a boil, and then you simmer it with the cover off. And like I said, about anywhere from 4+ hours, and overnight is great if you can do it. And it's going to really, it's going to evaporate and really cook down, and you're going to have a beautiful broth. And so what I do is I take little jars like these ones in the picture, and I fill them up. You leave some room at the space for expansion. And once they're cool, I put them in the freezer, and I freeze them. And that way I can take them out and use them as I need them. I can't say enough about this. If you want to test out what it feels good to feel really good, have bone broth every day for at least 1 to 2 weeks. And I would say have it first thing in the morning, and then add in whatever else that you have for breakfast or your habit. You're going to notice a huge difference. You're going to love it. Okay, turmeric. This is the new golden child on the market. It's certainly not new. It's ancient, but it's gaining in popularity. And it's anti-inflammatory. So as we were talking before, we want to make sure that we keep the inflammation down, and this stuff does it beautifully. You can add it to food by, cooking with it, sprinkling it on. You can even add it to a non-dairy milk and make a golden milk. So almond milk, rice milk, cashew milk, coconut milk, and whatever you're accustomed to drinking. You put about a cup of that on a saucepan on the stove, warm it up, add some raw honey, and probably like a teaspoon to a tablespoon of turmeric, depending on how spicy you like it. And you can add other things too. And I would say make sure you put a little spritz of, not necessarily a spritz, but a dash of black pepper, because the active ingredient in turmeric, which is called curcumin, it's the active ingredient in turmeric, and it helps. If you want to help your body absorb it better, you add a little bit of black pepper. Something about the combination of the two helps you have better absorption of the health promoting properties. So you can enjoy that any way you like it. It's delicious. You can even get it in a supplement form. I would just say, if you do, make sure it has black pepper included with it, so you get the most bang for your buck. Okay, so now we're moving on to greens. And I don't think this is a big surprise to anybody. We should be having greens in our diet. But there was a saying when I was in nutrition school at Integrative Nutrition that was pretty popular. If it's green inside, it's clean inside. And so basically, the more you can add greens to your diet, the more your body is going to, it's like a mini detox for it to some degree. So you can have Brussels sprouts, which are really popular right now, especially if you're going out to eat, kale, spinach, broccoli, asparagus. And one of the things that's really great about those particular veggies, in addition, of course, there's many others, but the ones that we're talking about, is the fact that they help metabolize estrogen. And so, especially as we age, estrogen tends to drop off, and estrogen is a feel-good hormone. So we want to preserve that for as long as we can. And if eating some, broccoli or spinach is going to help us do that, then that's what we're doing, right? Because estrogen is a feel-good hormone. It makes us feel sexy. It makes us feel vibrant, strong. So there's a lot of reasons why we want to keep a natural estrogen balance as well as we can. And this is just one of many ways. Okay, so what to avoid? There are certainly foods out there, and probably things that aren't really, they're not a whole food, that can exacerbate your hormones. Caffeine being one of them. If you want your cup of coffee in the morning because that's your ritual, or maybe you need that extra energy, try and keep it to 1 cup. And just, I guess, don't overdo it, because when we have too much caffeine, it's definitely going to interfere with sleep cycles. It's going to make us feel jittery, and it causes cortisol levels to increase. And if you haven't picked up on the message yet, about how I feel about cortisol. You know, we do not want long periods of time of extended cortisol. It's just not good for us. So the other thing with caffeine too is that it tends to, if we have caffeine with food, so say you're having coffee with your breakfast, it tends to speed up the digestive process. And while maybe you're thinking that's a good thing, it really isn't, because it means that there's not enough time to have nutrient absorption. So keep that in mind too. So perhaps you don't eat when you're drinking the coffee, or maybe you eat before you have it, if that's something that you can, work your mind around. However you want to do it, just, try anything once, see if it works for you, see how you feel. That's the most important thing. Second on the list is alcohol. I don't think we have to talk a whole lot about this, but it does interfere with estrogen, our feel-good hormones. So just, in moderation. And make sure that you're drinking enough water in order to avoid getting dehydrated, because when we're dehydrated, it does a whole host of things, but it can make you feel anxious. It can make you, you're exhausted. Obviously, you don't have the energy that you want. Water is really an amazing way to give yourself energy naturally. And most of us, myself included at times, don't always follow that. And you could feel like off balance, either emotionally or mindfully or physically, just by not having enough water. So perhaps consider adding that into your daily regimen, and it would be about half your weight in ounces. And so that's quite a bit. So try and work your way up to it. Do it for at least, a month or so, see how you feel. And then thirdly, sugar. I think most people are educated in the way that sugar is making health, depleting health in this day and age. We're eating way more sugar than any other period of time in history. Sugar causes inflammation. We already heard about that. So it's one of the things we want to try and avoid. And it's one of the biggest culprits when it comes to hot flashes. So if you've been prone to having hot flashes, check in with yourself and see what you've been eating. And you're probably going to have to do a little bit of label reading, because sugar tends to infiltrate a lot of foods. There's just no way around it. So just do your best. And if you can, try and shift to, especially say you're having it in your morning tea or your coffee, try and shift to something else that's a little bit more natural, like honey or pure maple syrup, or stevia, or if you like something a little more like granulated, try coconut crystals or even xylitol. So those are some different ways that you can shift it, and then just keep an eye on it, because I think you'll be surprised at how much sugar you're actually eating that you don't even realize it. I mean, even check a ketchup bottle; it's in everything, and it doesn't mean you have to kick it all at once. Just slowly but surely take your time. Taking one step at a time is better than not doing anything at all. It does not have to be an all or nothing proposition. The other thing with sugar to keep in mind is that it has, there's clinical research that shows that it lights up the pleasure centers of our brain. And while that might sound like a good thing because it makes us happy, what ends up happening is then we need more and more of it, and it becomes addictive in order to get back that feeling. And because our body isn't going to, it's not going to give us estrogen when it already sees like, oh, we're already feeling good, so I'm going to hold that in reserve. Well, that's not what we want. We want our body doing the work. We don't want outside influences doing it. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm sure you have lots of questions, and if you do, and you would like, I'm going to encourage you to reach out to me through my website. If you want to do a free 30-minute consultation, there's, if you go to the homepage of yourinfinitewellness.com and scroll to the bottom, there's an option where you can sign up for a complimentary 30-minute consultation. And you can be anywhere in the world for this, because we can do it by phone, we can do it by this platform here, Zoom, we can do it face-to-face if you're in my area. I'm happy to have a sit down with you and just talk a little bit more about what's going on with you in your life. So now that you've learned a little bit more about hormonal health, what foods help it, what foods wreak havoc. Are you ready to take it to the next level? Are you wanting to maybe make the next step to getting yourself back on track, rebalancing your hormones, and getting your life back to at least normal, if not amazing? I do want to offer a special one-time offer for anyone watching this, 50% off my hormone assessment program. And what it includes is a hormonal questionnaire, which was developed by Dr. Sarah Gottfried. She's a Harvard-trained physician who, going through a lot of hormonal issues in the early days of her practice, she realized that there were just certain things that would trigger hormonal imbalance. So she has used this particular assessment on over 20,000 of her patients without even a blood test, a lot of them. So if you want to check that out, we can go through that process and look and see which hormones, and it covers 7 different hormones, which ones are out of balance and what you can do to get them back on track. And then, so after you fill out the questionnaire, we will have that 30-minute health assessment meeting by phone or in person or however you want to communicate. And we'll go over what the results are and what it looks like from your perspective. You can give me a little bit more information about you and what your lifestyle's like. And we can see about giving you the tools that you need in order to get back on track. We'll also review your supplement regimen, because a lot of times the supplements that you're on, if they're not made with pure ingredients, those can throw off hormonal balance. It could be something as simple as a supplement that you're taking is kind of making things go a little bit haywire. And then I can also give you just some suggestions based on the assessment. So we'll look at the assessment, which hormone's out of balance. And if it requires more than what's in my scope of practice, we'll talk about next steps about either a functional medicine consult with a doctor in your area, or even speaking to your current doctor about what's going on and get you whatever additional help that you might need. So I am offering this for 50% off. It's usually $197, so it's a little more than 50% off. And I would love for you to do this if you feel like that's the space you're at right now. If you're ready to move on and take the next steps, or just take the information from the presentation and implement that so that you can start to make those steps and see the improvements yourself. So you could just do a DIY, do it yourself, and see what progress you can make. And I would imagine it will be significant. So I want to thank you for tuning in to my little masterclass. I'm really excited that you sat to the end and watched through this. Again, if I can be of any assistance, there is a contact form on my website, yourinfinitewellness.com. My phone number is here on this page as well. You're welcome to call me or email me, whatever suits your fancy. And that phone number can also direct text messaging to my cell phone. So if you'd like to send me a text, just let me know how you're doing. I'd be happy to chat with you about your hormonal health. Thank you, and I appreciate your time.